Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know how many people will be able to join us live, but um, it will be shared after the recording is finished. I will share it so everybody can view it. Um, so I'm going to give it a few minutes, see if anybody is going to join, and then I will take and go over the tools that I use. Then I'll give you another demonstration for a next portion of the paper piecing. I hope everyone is having a great Labor Day weekend and a great Sunday, enjoying the long weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the tools that I use, and so everybody can get a better idea. I know I had some questions about some of the tools that I was using, and of course this will be posted for review after the live video is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to flip the screen around and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the tools that I use. These are not required tools. These are just ones that I find make my paper piecing experience a lot better. Okay, so one of the first items that I absolutely love is the OmniGrid press and cut mats. I have two sizes. I have one that I carry with me to when I'm doing retreats, or when I am teaching, or when I am doing anything with friends and all, because sometimes the bigger one, you don't have a lot of room for it. So this is the smaller one. And of course, you just open it up, and on the left side, you have the cutting mat, and on the right side, you have the pressing mat. I also have, that I love using at my station here at home, I have the bigger one. And I'm going to step back a little bit so you can see. And it's the same thing, except it's a larger size. It is roughly 18 by 12. Really good size for sitting beside my desk instead of getting up and going to the iron or having to set a small cutting mat on my desk and another a pressing mat on the other side of me, or getting up and going to the iron. And speaking of the iron, a lot of people ask a question about the iron that I use. This is the little pressing iron that I have in my video. It is the Prem Petite Press, and it has a power button, and it has levels 1 through 4. And if you notice on the plate, it is a very small plate. It gets hot enough to press. It will burn you, but the way it's made, with the plate being so thin, it's difficult to hit your hand with it when you're holding your hand. It does look like it in the video that I did, that it was getting close to my hand, but that was just the angle. So some more items that I use is I will keep just plain index cards. I also will use the little paper cardboard inserts that come in the fat quarters. I'll use those to lay on my fold line when I am doing smaller pieces. And I'll just lay them, and that gives me the guide to be able to fold over and then trim my fabric. Another one that I use is I just have a actual plastic template that I use, that I cut, and it works really great. I've been asked about the arrows. The arrows are because that is the perfect straight edge. I checked it, and one side may just have a little bit of a wave, but the other side is perfectly straight. So I marked that so I always know which side to line up on my line when I'm turning my paper to press. Add a quarter rulers. I have 3 sizes that I use for my regular paper piecing. I have my 12-inch that I use for longer pieces, and most of the time I will use this one for even my smaller pieces, unless I'm strictly working with small blocks. Then I have my 6-inch. I also have a little bit wider one. I tend not to use it as much. I like the smaller ones better, but I do have it if I need it and I want to use it. The other ruler I have is my add an 1/8. This one is for mini quilts. When you're doing really tiny paper piecing, you can't use a 1/4 of an inch seam. You have to use an 1/8 of an inch. An example of where I would use this one is on this block that I've done here. And as you can see, it is 3 inches and it's diagonal. This block has, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is a mini block, and it has 21 different pieces of fabric in it. And when you're doing that, you're definitely going to want to use the add an 1/8 instead of an add a 1/4. I will use, the other question I had a lot about was the ruler I was using to trim. This is just a Quilt NC ruler. It's just a 2-inch wide see-through ruler, and it's really good because I can line it up right on the 1/4 inch to trim off my edges. So the next part is, everyone saw me using the glue the other day to hold my initial piece down. There's also some other options. I mean, you can always pin, of course. And you were asking about the glue stick. This is one that I got at Spool in Chattanooga. It's a Sue Daly glue stick pen. I like it because it's just small. You also can use the Elmer's washable school glue, the purple. And then yesterday, Andy at Red Hen turned me on to another item. Thank you, Andy. It is the Elmer glue dots. It will stick to the paper, and it will hold the fabric for you, but it will not take and it pulls right off the paper. The glue stays to the paper and will not stick to the fabric. Good afternoon, Dave. Glad you could join. Thank you everyone for joining. So a couple other things. I haven't tried this yet. I wasn't able to get a wooden one like Andy uses, but I did get a plastic one because I'm interested in trying this. I got a little plastic wallpaper ruler for when you don't have access to your iron to actually fold your seam over, and you can use this to roll over it to help press it. Another item that I love is I love my smaller 28mm rotary cutter. It keeps it out of my way. The bigger one is nice, but the smaller one just keeps and gives me more workspace because, you know, you have several items that are laying on your work area, so I always have to just maximize and make use of my space. I love these snips for trimming up my threads. They're just little small, they're embroidery snips, and they have a little curve so you don't accidentally cut into the paper. Good afternoon, Kelly. So that's the tools that I use. The other thing that was asked was the paper that I'm using. We all know paper for paper piecing is expensive. If you go to the store and you buy the actual paper, when you go into Joann's, you go in anywhere, it can be expensive. If you're new to it, you're going to want the little bit thicker paper that you can get like that, because if you have to go over and take a seam out that you've messed up and you have to stitch over it again, with the paper I use, you can get 2 times of going over that line, and after that you have to tape it sometimes. You have to be careful. I actually use a very thin newsprint. You can get from Blick. You can get from a company called Uline. I tend to print a lot of my paper piecing patterns onto a 11 by 17 paper. This helps me not have to do as much taping and piecing of my patterns. A lot of patterns that are larger, you have to actually print on multiple sheets and then go through and tape them together. I tend to not like that, so I bought a printer that will print up to 13 by 19 and gives me less taping, less piecing of the pattern. So with that, does anybody, before I go on to showing some of the other steps that I do, does anybody have any questions that I can answer for you? If you do, just put them into the chat window. I'm going to turn this back around just a moment and let me get some coffee, because talking a lot does hurt my throat some days, especially since talking yesterday a lot. So what I want to do then is I'm going to show you a couple more tips that really help out. So I'm going to flip the camera back around and give me just a moment. Alright, so one item, because I know that it is difficult to see when you're placing your first piece of fabric on to your back of your paper, is you can get a cheap light box if you need to have the extra light, and you can do one of two things. You can lay it on it, and so that you can see the lines through it, or the other option you can do is you take your very first one, and you can just take your ruler and mark your first line on the back, so that you can make sure that you have enough distance around that first block to get a 1/4 of an inch. And I always recommend going past that 1/4 of an inch allowance, just to allow yourself a little bit of extra room. So you can always take your light box and draw your line, or you can use the light box and lay your fabric on. Of course, you can see it through the white, but on colored you necessarily wouldn't see it through, but you can see that your fabric, you have enough to go over that. And so what you can do is, with these glue dots that Andy turned me on to, you just put it down and you listen for the click. And then you can do that, and you're ready for your first piece. And then of course you see when I pulled it off, it comes right off. The glue stays on the paper. It's still a little bit tacky, so if I needed to reposition it, I can go back and reposition. Frank, I'm not for sure. Is anybody else having any freezing issues? Thank you, Andy. It's just another option, so that if you don't have a light box, you can also just, if you can see through it, you can mark the first piece, and it's easier. Instead of trying to, what I end up doing is I end up putting my first piece on, and you can't see it really good through this, but if you flip it around and you look from the line side, you can take and see the fabric through it. So that's what I do a lot of times, is I tend to put my piece on and hold it up to the light and look through. But marking the line on the back is another great way. Hey Maddie, thanks for joining. Hollis, if you're doing your own patterns, I'll show you in just a second how I determine what size to cut the piece. If you're doing somebody else's patterns, of course, most of the time they will tell you, they should be telling you in your patterns what size to cut the piece. But let me do a real quick demonstration for you, Hollis, and show you how I determine to cut it. So give me just one moment. Give me 1 second, guys. I don't think this will end it, but I'm gonna make sure I haven't swapped back over to my other router. No, I'm good. So I'm on my good router. So let me show you this, Hollis, then. All right. So if I'm doing my own pattern, Hollis, what I end up doing is I take my see-through ruler, and this one's great for this, and I have a smaller one if I'm doing smaller pieces. But I start at the very top and I lay it on an inch line. I don't start and do it this way, because I like to be able to see that that line is directly on that line. And so from seam to the tip is 2 inches. I need 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on each side. So that makes it 2.5. I always add at least 1/8 or 1/4. It's better to be a little bit bigger than to get your pieces cut out and find out you're too small. So this is 2 inches long. So I would make this one 2 3/4 to give me a little bit extra. Then I'm going to check on this one. It is actually, I'm not going to sit here and try and cut triangles out because there's no sense in it. It's not that much waste to really affect and cost me extra money. So I'm going to lay it on the beginning line and go over to my point. It's 3/4 of an inch. Add another 1/4 for each side, and that makes it 1 1/4. And then so I'm going to add another 1/4 just for the safety. So it's going to be 1 1/2 by 2 3/4 is the square that I would cut. If it is a true triangle, I will take and make a square and cut them on the diagonal. I don't think I have any pieces in this quilt that's really that way. One that I did for teaching Russ and Chris yesterday did have it. So with it, I always go a little bit bigger and then do the cut on the diagonal. But most of the time, I'm going to do strips on most of mine and not worry about that little bit of extra that I'm going to waste. There is some waste of paper piecing. You just want to, I try to keep it to a minimum. Does anybody else have any other questions at the moment? Is it still buffering or freezing? Okay. All right, so I am going to, if you have no other questions about the tools I use, I'm going to go a little bit more in, a step further than what I did last week. Last week I showed you one section of a block and how to put that paper piece on that one block. So today I'm going to show you how to join 2 blocks together. So give me just a moment and I'm going to step over to my machine and I'll show you that. So here I am going to take, and I'm going to take 2 of the blocks that I made, and I'm going to join these blocks together. So I've already joined down this side, but what you're going to do is, of course, you're going to make sure that they are facing the right direction, because this direction would be wrong. So the first thing I do is I just line them up. And when you've cut them on the 1/4 inch, they should line up. But what you want to do is you want to look where the seams meet. Make sure those are together. And I'm going to pin them to keep them together. I'm going to come down to my next seam and make sure those match up. And I'm going to pin again. Then I'm going to come to the end and verify that those match and pin. This is one step that I recommend that everybody does when you're putting your pieces together. It can tend to take, and your paper, because it is a thicker layer, because you have all the seams, plus you have paper on each side. You want to pin to hold it together. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to baste this. So I'm going to change my stitch length up to about 3 and 3.4. And I know that Carol Doak recommends basting also. With Carol's method, she goes and you baste 3 or 4 stitches, lift it up, come down, baste 3 or 4, come down, baste 3 or 4. I don't do that. A basting stitch at 3 1/4, 3 1/2 is going to come out easy if you have to take it out. There's no sense in spending a lot of time lifting your presser foot, moving the paper. Just go down through it. And baste. So once you've basted, you can look on the back side and see if you're on the stitch line. My paper shifted just a hair, 1 stitch width. So what I can do is, since it is just lightly basted, just pop out a few stitches here and there. And then all I have to do is just grab my threads and pull them out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line it up again and double check everything. And if your paper is shifting, check how much pressure you have on your presser foot. Because when we're doing this many layers, sometimes you have to let off the pressure. Every machine is different, so that part you will need to look at your owner's manual and adjust your tension if you can. Okay, and I'm on the line now. So what I'm going to do is take out my pins, and I've got it basted. So I'm going to flip it open and check to make sure everything lines up. everything lined up except one portion, and that was right here from the blue to the green. So what I can do is go back and just pop that out real quick right there, from there down, and pull it down and make it line up. And I'm doing this, I'm making them actually come off on purpose because I want to show you how you can line them up. So what I'm doing is, I've got it lined up there, and it could be that I didn't press that one seam over perfect, and it's off just a hair. So I've checked inside where my seam is going to go, and shifted it up. Just a hair, so that it doesn't throw off my block, but enough so that it does line up. And you can see that it lines up. So what I'm going to do now is I am just going to drop my stitch length back down, and that was another question that a lot of people had. I stitch roughly, when I'm doing paper piecing, it's about 1.4, 1.5, and that does a couple of different things. One, that helps perforate my paper, and because you're going to be taking this paper off, you want your stitches smaller so that you don't pull your stitches out when you are taking all this paper off. And so that is how we put the two blocks together. So the other now is, I said I bought the little roller to test out. So if I don't have my iron, I can roll it over and take my roller and press my seam that way. I can also take my iron, if I have it, and press my seam over. And so that's how you put two blocks together. So, showing all of that now, showing you how you put the two blocks together. Last week I showed how you do the actual follow the lines and everything. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer for you at this point? You can. And for those of you that are not able to join the live video, of course, you can always send me a message on Facebook. I'll accept any friend request as long as you have quilting stuff, because I do check that, because, you know, as we all know, we get a lot of crazy requests. You're more than welcome to send me a friend request. You have a question about something I've shown. I love to help. I love to share ideas and help anyone out and give them advice, and I just want everybody to have fun at doing the paper piecing when you do it. Chris, I take my paper off at the when I have the whole quilt together, and the reason for that is when you're paper piecing, you have a lot of bias fabrics. If you take the paper off, for me, I found that if you take the paper off before you have the quilt joined, you tend to have a tendency to stretch the fabric a little bit on the bias, and you don't want that. So my best scenario is that I always just leave it on and teach everybody to take it off at the end. You won't stretch the fabric, you won't pull on the bias, and you're not going to get frustrated with the quilt trying to get it to go together. About the only time that I take the paper off is when I'm doing curves. With the curves, of course, you're going to have to take the paper off. Otherwise, I'll leave it on. Is there any other questions? Good afternoon, Jason. All right. If you don't have any questions right now, guys, like I said, you're welcome to send me a message on Facebook. You're welcome to send me a friend request. All my other information is listed on Facebook. My Instagram account, I try to put these videos on YouTube also. And as long as y'all are enjoying them, I'll keep doing some videos and keep posting some more. I do smile, Janice. I just get to talking and don't think about smiling. But thank y'all again for joining. And I hope y'all have a great afternoon and enjoy your Labor Day. And please let me know anything I can assist you with. What kind of videos you would like to see. I'm more than happy to do whatever helps you. Have a great afternoon, guys. Thank you.